Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff is just a couple minutes away, so
No problem.
starting once he's
She's calling you out. This meeting.
okay.
I did not get it yet, but I said, yeah, it was just a verbal, so they both correct. I see reports of that.
If anybody wants to move their microphones around, they are adjustable. You can get them down so they're not in your face.
If anyone would like, we have coffee in the back too before we get started.
Does everybody want coffee?
There's our sheriff.
Good morning.
Congressman, how are you today?
Sheriff. Morning.
Hey, Blake, how are you?
Good.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I love what Main Street looks like.
Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, how are you?
Live streaming right now.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll get a little bit of this started. I know we've got a lot of friends in the media that have joined us here, and I'm greatly appreciative. I'm Congressman Nick Langworthy, the freshman congressman represents Lancaster. You know, I'm very proud to represent 7 counties in western New York in the southern tier: Erie, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Allegheny, Steuben, Chemung, and Schuyler counties. You know, we go all the way to Watkins Glen, and we're having these conversations all over the district. Yesterday we did one in Olean in Cattaraugus County. We also did one in Allegheny County and Belmont to discuss fentanyl and the scourge that it is on all of our communities. And sadly, opioid overdoses, you know, leading with fentanyl, is the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. That's staggering that we have so many people losing their lives. You know, China is manufacturing this deadly fentanyl, and they have thousands of chemical plants. You know, for context purposes, America has about 300 chemical plants across our entire nation. There's some estimates that the Chinese have as many as 200,000 chemical plants, some of which devoted to manufacturing this fentanyl that they sell to the cartels, and they mule it into this country. And really, our crisis at the southern border has made every community a border community. This fentanyl has made every community a border community. And this cuts across all walks of life, no matter, you know, how poor or rich, no matter what, you know, socioeconomic scale you're at, what career path, tragedy has struck. I believe at this point, everyone is about 1 degree of separation from someone that has suffered a tragedy at the hands of this crisis. And I thought it was very important. We've taken action as the House Republican majority to pass the HALT Fentanyl Act. And it had bipartisan support. You know, I don't, you know, mean to draw that in partisan terms. This is something that we need to take all the partisanship out of and tackle this crisis and solve it. And that's what these dialogues are about, to try to get community partners, community stakeholders together to have the discussion as to what can we do best. And, you know, we brought people from all across the spectrum. We very proud to have Mayor Lynn Ruda of Village of Lancaster. Thank you so much for hosting us here in the beautiful village. We're at Town Hall. Our Councilman Bob Leary, who's the soon to be the supervisor of the town of Lancaster. Thank you. And let me just tell you, Lancaster is beautiful. And what you've done with the downtown is great. It's a gorgeous morning here. We have our undersheriff, Bill Cooley, thank you so much. Our sheriff, John Garcia. Assemblyman Mike Norris, a great partner in state government, someone I've worked with a long time. And then our Erie County legislator, Frank Todaro, who represents Lancaster. Thank you so much. And we're going to hear from great officials from the Lancaster Police Department. We have, 3 great representatives from the Lancaster Police Department under Chief Gummo. And then we have Gwendolyn Borick of Focus to talk about some of the victims' impact in treatments. I'd like to have this as a free-flowing discussion, where we can, brainstorm ideas. I mean, we want to highlight what we've done with the HALT Act, the important nature of this legislation, and we need Senate action on this bill. I believe the president will sign this into law if we get the Senate to pass this. But it basically is moving the fentanyl-grade drugs to a permanent Schedule I narcotic. That is going to help our law enforcement officials have the tools necessary, our Border Patrol agents to have the tools necessary to seize these drugs, to get them off the streets. And, we obviously have some criminal justice issues here in the state of New York that I'm sure we will end up touching on in this. But it also enables research to better understand the long-term effects on fentanyl. Let's face it, these medications started out as something to help people. It has been bastardized and taken to its lowest common denominator, and now people are using it for the thrill and the high that is costing people their lives. And I just thought it was very important that we bring all these stakeholders together to have this discussion, and hopefully this will spin off into more discussions, because we have to all be in this together to end this scourge, because we're losing our young people. I believe China is the greatest threat to the United States, both domestically and internationally, and we see both in this very circumstance, because they're profiting off of the eventual death of Americans by selling these cheap drugs. And, Sheriff, I'm sure you could touch on this, but, 10, 12 years ago, we were worried about homemade meth labs all over the place.
Yes, we were.
Now the fentanyl is so cheap, my understanding is a lot of those people don't even bother with it because you can get the fentanyl cheaper and you can sell it that way. Just 2 milligrams can be lethal. A sugar packet of fentanyl is a size packet is enough to kill 2,000 people. I mean, I saw some pictures from one of the narcotics agents that works for the DEA yesterday, that he said this is enough to kill the entire county of Cattaraugus. I mean, this is something that is outside the playbook of the old war on drugs. And it's a total synthetic, it's being mass produced, and it's stealing our youth. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sheriff Garcia for some comments as we open up.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this, to the public's attention. I don't think it gets enough attention. We speak a lot about violence out on our streets due to illegal weapons. I'll give you some data. So far this year, we've had 165 overdose deaths. 165. That's about 1 per day. If it wasn't for Narcan, the 411 other individuals that were saved would be dead. This is an epidemic, and Congressman, you're absolutely right. It's stealing the lives of our youth. But what we've seen is that the largest age group now being affected is 30 to 39. I just want to tell people that use recreational cocaine, it's not safe. Your drugs are not safe. Fentanyl has weaponized heroin and cocaine, which were dangerous enough. Why? For profit. A kilo of fentanyl compared to a kilo of cocaine and heroin, much cheaper. The drug dealers use it as a cutting agent to extend their product. They care about making money, so it's about greed. And I welcome this new legislation because the fight has to be taken to the drug dealers to let them know that what they're doing is basically committing murder. For the Erie County Sheriff's Office, we have kind of a two-pronged issue, which is we cover half the county. So we have the issue out on the street, as does Lancaster, City of Buffalo, and everyone else. And then we have about 800 incarcerated individuals that are seeking to bring it inside. I just had a discussion with the State Commissioner of Corrections. We had a health emergency, as you remember, with COVID, so we had some screens up. I wanted to keep those screens up for no other reason than to stop and halt fentanyl from coming into the two jails. As the congressman said, a sugar packet. So you bring in 2 grams of what you think is heroin or cocaine, and it turns out to be fentanyl. That's 20 people dead. Okay, this is not our great-grandfather's contraband of people sneaking in tobacco, perhaps marijuana, or a key in their cake or whatever they used to do. This is about fentanyl. It's a new weapon. We have to address it. New York State still does not have legislation to cover this. The undersheriff could touch on 2 investigations that we're doing locally that we have to go to the federal prosecutor. And we hope that the federal prosecutor wants to cooperate and doesn't have, too much work to follow through on this. We have to charge people, in my opinion, with or attempted murder or murder. If you know that you're giving somebody something that's going to end their life, I would think it's murder.
Yeah, it's true, Sheriff. We're doing our utmost to pursue criminal charges where we can take an overdose victim and then figure out who their dealer was and what the genesis of the product that killed them and where it came from. There's an enhancement in federal statute where possession with intent to sell, where it eventually leads to death, can result in a 20-year minimum mandatory sentence. So we pursue that when we can. We have about 3 cases going right now where we think we're getting some traction on, but 3 of 165, you can see the challenge it poses for law enforcement. They're tricky investigations, they're complicated, and they require a lot of resources. So they're difficult to pursue, but they're worthy endeavors for certain. So we'll look at them like a homicide case.
It's, with New York State's criminal justice laws in place and the elimination of cash bail, I heard a lot yesterday in our roundtables in the southern tier about how that has really hurt the opportunities to develop relationships with informants. Because, let's face facts, if you don't have consequences, if you can't be held in jail, there's not much to be held over your head in that respect. And so let's just walk through a theoretical here, and if any of our partners in the Lancaster police want to jump in, please feel free to do so. But you catch an assailant out there with, a packet of fentanyl. What is, how does that work? How does the stop and arrest?
So, having worked in narcotics for 15 years, you're absolutely right. We always want to walk up the ladder to get the biggest fish, right? To get the individual that's out there mixing the fentanyl with be it cocaine or heroin, or bringing it in from out of state. So that hurts. That part definitely hurts, is because there's no consequences and no accountability to the people that are getting arrested, because they know they're going to get right out many times quicker than the law enforcement officer that just arrested them. Another issue is, which is ironic, is that bail reform is hurting people that are addicted to drugs. Because the only time they get any type of help is when they're in the custody of be it the Erie County Sheriff's Office or any county sheriff's office, we have medication-assisted treatment programs. We dispense Suboxone, methadone, and counseling. We have a peer program with Save the Michaels. We connect the individual with a counselor once they get outside. None of this is going to happen if you get arrested and you're right back out on the street. So I'll get calls from people's parents and say, is my daughter Janie or Doe or John Doe in your custody? We say no. They say, that's terrible news. Because the only time they get any type of service is when they're in the custody of the sheriff's office. Otherwise, they're back in an abandoned house or under a bridge or somewhere doing heroin, cocaine, laced with fentanyl. It only takes one hit for you to die.
So just to clarify, when you arrest someone, they possess fentanyl, they just are given an appearance ticket at this point under New York state law?
It's, it's really, the congressman, it's, the penal law charge 22003, criminal possession of a controlled substance, and the seventh is, if it's fentanyl, there's not even a law, a penal law that you could charge for that, because fentanyl is not listed in New York State as a scheduled drug. So if there's any cocaine or heroin, that's the charge. So we are hoping that the New York State legislature and they have to understand that we need something where we could charge. Now federally, that's why the undersheriff had mentioned that we have to go to the federal prosecutor to do these, charges, investigations, because fentanyl is not a scheduled controlled drug in New York State.
If I could jump in, Congressman.
Absolutely.
For anybody who doesn't know, I did 26 and a half years in federal law enforcement. Part of that time was 20 years with ATF as a street agent and as a supervisory special agent. I also did 3 years at the border. I've never seen anything like this before in my time. I was around for the crack epidemic. We had the tools in place to work the system. We would work with the state, county, local officers. We'd identify the biggest drug dealer in the area. Then we'd come in and we'd bring the resources of the federal government to bear. And I was assigned to DEA for a little over a year. So we had some money, we had some undercovers, we had people who could step in there and get that done. If you don't put anybody in jail, okay, there's no deterrence in the current system right now. We used to use somebody to be arrested at the local level, okay? We'd offer them some type of deal to move up to the actual bigger dealers to go after the biggest fish that we could possibly find. That's what the federal government can bring into this. That's what we got to be able to bring into this again, but without any kind of deterrence. We got nowhere to really jump in. Now there's other ways you can identify some of the big fish through the banking system, through suspicious activity reports. A lot of that stuff goes to the federal government. I also did 10 years at 2 local banks, so we could find out where the money's going to. So that's another way the federal government may be able to jump in there. But the traditional way of doing it was from the street up to the bigger dealers. And the federal government, I retired in 2009, so I can't speak for what they're doing right now. But back then, we loved to work with state and local guys to identify the big fish and come into the community and try to make a real difference in those type of investigations. So again, you need something at the state and local level to make sure these people are facing, some type of punishment for what they're doing and to deter them from continuing on in these same bad acts. And again, remember, you're putting people in jail, and the number one priority there is you're protecting the local citizenry. And that's very important to the whole system. My time at Customs, 3 years, was the northern border. I didn't do the southern border, so I didn't see how crazy it was down there. But again, we had people dedicated to looking for drugs the whole time. With the craziness at the southern border right now, you don't have the same type of manpower that's looking for that because they're out chasing down illegal immigrants or immigrants coming into the country. So again, there's got to be that combination between the federal, state, local agencies.
We do need the partnership, and there's unintended consequences for some of the laws that people tried to reform the bail law, and I think there's been far more bad consequences than there have been positive. I'd like to, I forgot to welcome, Keith Bryan, Chief of Staff to Senator Pat Galvin, our former sheriff of Erie County, and longtime senator representing Lancaster, great friend of law enforcement, someone that's been in the fight here as well. So thanks for being with us, Keith. And now, Chief, what are some of the experiences that your department has had in dealing with this in terms of a day-to-day response to overdoses? I'll just share one story yesterday from my roundtable in Olean. The chief got a call while we were in the meeting and had to go respond around the corner to an overdose while we were having the discussion. And he said this is not an uncommon action, that we're doing this on a regular basis and having to save a lot of lives in Narcan, unfortunately.
I think for what we're seeing through our department, we have to basically just assume that any overdose is going to be fentanyl related. With what they're mixing it with now and the way society is using, the drug dealers are using fentanyl to cut it into the cocaine and the heroin and stuff. And with the crisis that we're seeing with heroin and cocaine still rising, you have to assume that any overdose is going to be related to fentanyl, and that could be from anybody in high school all the way up to a senior that has had an issue all their lives. It can affect anybody.
How many officers in the Lancaster Police Department?
We're 52 officers.
52, so a very good sized department. I mean, on a daily basis, how many drug, whether it's fentanyl or otherwise, how many overdose cases are you looking at on a weekly basis, do you think, roughly?
I would say we're probably dealing with 3 to 4 overdoses on a weekly basis. As far as overdose deaths, we're probably looking at 1 to 2 a month within Lancaster.
It's a lot of lives affected in one town.
Yes.
And just the empty seats that this crisis is leaving at family tables is something that, we have got to stop.
Congressman, I reflect on my days in the Buffalo Homicide Unit. We would seem to respond to overdose deaths as almost a matter of routine, unfortunately. And this is 6, 7, 8 years ago. It seemed that the normal age we'd see would be like late teens, maybe to 30 years old. Now there's an uptick in overdose deaths between the ages of 30 to 39. And, most have theorized that it's because fentanyl is now being used as a cutting agent for cocaine. So not just your opiate addicted people are falling victim to overdose deaths, but your casual weekend warriors, for the lack of a better term. And it was explained to me by a lab technician in the Central Police Services lab that there's a molecular component, like a magnetic component to fentanyl, where when it's used as a cutting agent and it's thrown into a bag that is then sold as retail, it will begin to connect or reconnect to itself molecularly. So if 3 people are using out of the same bag, 2 might be okay and 1 could be stricken dead. So it's extremely dangerous. You shouldn't find comfort if you're a drug user in the fact that one person used it without overdose, and you might not have the same result.
Well, I heard a statistic yesterday that just 3 parts per million can be fatal.
It's unbelievable.
And you're trusting people that aren't exactly scientists to, produce something that you're going to ingest into your body. And, you're hearing more and more about people that are taking a pill that they may be recreationally abusing, and that pill doesn't turn out to be what they thought it was. It's now something that's laced with fentanyl, and, the pill presses that are being used to create new drugs, put out on the street. I have all the respect in the world for you guys being on the front lines of this discussion. Any other stories or things that you have encountered, from the street level, here in Lancaster?
Another aspect I think is worth noting is officer safety. As you mentioned, it's very fatal, and it's a powder form. We walk into an environment where it may be airborne. We got to make sure our officers are aware of taking proper precautions, being safe about handling the drugs. So that's another thing that's worth noting.
That's actually...
Captain, that's a great point. Captain, great point. We had an individual that was off the road in a ditch. A passenger was in the vehicle, but no driver. Our deputy, thank God there were 2 deputies that responded. Our first deputy saw the victim in the car, opened the door, start assessing the situation, called for an ambulance. In the meantime, they were overcome. And if it wasn't for their partner, Narcanning, a deputy, this is what we're facing. It's the unknown. So it's a very good point you just made, Captain. It's, people that by choice are doing it. And I say by choice they're buying what they think is heroin and cocaine. I don't think that by choice that they would buy fentanyl, but you never know. However, our first responders, be it police, fire, ambulance, they have to be so careful. There are people that search those that are arrested. What we have to do now. This is very dangerous, Congressman, but it's also very costly. And as you know, it all trickles down to the counties and the town departments that we have to, do more training and better equipment and so forth. So this is a challenge for all of us.
Well, it is, our law enforcement officers face challenges that they have never faced. Just, there's obviously opposition. There's been a lot of harmful rhetoric against a lot of our law enforcement. We've talked about that in some of our other press events. Your families never have the guarantee that you're coming home safe. And I have the utmost respect for everybody that puts on that uniform, and every day I'm in Congress or in public service, I will, have the back of our law enforcement agents, because, you run into danger to protect us, and we owe you that support. And to have one more layer in some of the anecdotal stories I heard, the Elmira Police Departments told me they went into an apartment, and there's a guy just cutting it with playing cards, like something you'd see on TV, and they had to bring in hazmat suits and treat it like a chemical situation. Because just that little ingestion from an airborne particle could end your life quickly. And you don't deserve to have to deal with that. And you don't have the equipment. And it's not like you're going to, go knock on that car window with a gas mask on. To protect yourself. And there's just the unintended consequences of all of this. And as they're chasing, bigger and bigger highs, it's terrifying, really, what we're dealing with. I want to give some of our other guests a chance to speak. But I guess we'll start from the state level with Assemblyman Mike Norris. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Congressman, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing attention to this important issue and to our local stakeholders and our law enforcement. I do appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from all of you about these concerns. I can tell you within our conference, Minority Conference, this has been a top concern of ours. We have many colleagues, including Assemblyman Keith Brown, who has been a leader in this. I know I've spoken to the sheriff about the implications of fentanyl even going into the jail. We had a recent conversation about some legislation that, again, was bad for the people of the state of New York. Fortunately, it was not passed this year, but I thank you for that partnership. I also wanted to say that in terms of bail reform, which I voted against, I'm very much opposed to it. We are now seeing the consequences of it and how it's impacting the lives of individuals who, in certain circumstances, like you mentioned, Sheriff, they would receive the treatment within the facility or be placed into a diversion program under the old rules. Now they simply get an appearance ticket and they just go about their business, and it's impacting the lives of so many, including themselves. And these are important information, data points and information for me to take back to the state capitol and continue to advocate and be loud about, because it is very, very important. I just want to mention a couple of things because we brought them up. There is legislation that would, for death by the dealer, move it up to an A1 felony, and I'm a co-sponsor of legislation. Actually, it's a bipartisan bill. We need action on that bill. That needs to pass. Also, the criminal possession of fentanyl. You mentioned that there's no specific language within that. And one of my colleagues, Assemblymember Brabenak, has that bill. I will be adding my name as a co-sponsor to that bill. And one more thing, Mr. Durso in the Assembly, Assemblyman Durso, which I also co-sponsor this bill regarding officer safety and the exposure to fentanyl and the importance of charging those individuals who expose our first responders, our law enforcement, and also our volunteer firefighters, our paid firefighters, and everyone who responds to the scene. So again, I want to just thank you, Congressman, for bringing all of us together from all levels of government, from hearing from law enforcement, and applaud you for the work that you're doing and supporting this very important federal piece of legislation. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to my partners.
Thank you, Assemblyman, and it's just so important that we have, full cooperation between the levels of government, and people have to communicate and talk, and you guys are masters of that. The law enforcement, having to work, from the federal to the state to the municipalities, right down to the towns and the village departments. I've heard from some of our departments that they would, just like you pointed out, we got to charge these things federally, so there's consequences, and they can hold, the dealers for bail. And our smaller cities in this congressional district, some of those have some serious problems, as they're the entry point into New York from on the drug train. Is some of the first communities over. I mean, particularly Jamestown. I mean, they have a serious, heavy drug issue there, and they are trying to find as much federal partnership as possible. We're looking at legislative possibilities to see if we can lower thresholds so it's easier to charge federally. Problem being, most states still in the United States have still strong criminal justice codes. It's just a handful of states that have eliminated the bail system and really loosened things up to the level of New York. So, trying to create a 50-state public policy to solve the problems of just a couple of states, that is, becoming, it's much more difficult, to make it rise to the occasion of federal legislation. At the county level, our legislator, Frank Tadaro.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm honored to be here at this roundtable discussion with everyone here today. As a county legislator, one of my main keys of my job description is the funding that comes through the budgets to pass those budgets. And one of my most important elements of that is to be sure that the Erie County Sheriff's Department, when they do come in and they explain their budget and what they're looking for, tools is one of the biggest things that they do need and require. Recently, their helicopters becoming more antiquated. It's downtime is reoccurring, and they have come up to say, hey, look, we need a new helicopter. And it's really not an argument. It's something that is required, because we talk about the Mexican border as being one of the biggest issues that we have, but it's now the Canadian border. The Canadian border, if you think about it, Erie County has the Niagara River, and that's our separation, and that's a major concern, because we see it in the paper almost every day that pallets of marijuana are coming over the border. Pallets, bundles. It's very easy to hide fentanyl and get that over the border much easier. So I feel that they're punching a hole right through Erie County. It's coming right through here, and then it's getting separated throughout the United States. So I want to be sure that, those tools that we need are required and necessary, that I can make sure that we advocate to get those funds and make sure we have that protection.
Thank you so much, legislator. I mean, you bring up the northern border. All the attention's always on the southern border, and rightfully so. It has been an absolute dumpster fire of a piece of public policy in the last several years, and we've seen, that coming home to roost now. I'm of the mindset, if you're going to have a country, you got to have a border, and we have to defend the border. We have to have respect from others, that this is our country, and we have laws, and law and order needs to prevail, and we have a right way to enter and a wrong way to enter. But you bring up a very important point about the northern border, and we've actually created a caucus within the House of Representatives of northern border security. Because this is, what we're talking about today, this is a for-profit entity. I mean, these people are doing this to our country, not because they just really like people to take drugs. They want to make cash. They are profiting off of this terror. And as hopefully we move forward and tighten things at the southern border, the northern border becomes an option because it's so vast. It's the largest and longest undefended border in the world. And, we love our Canadian neighbors. We live in a wonderful binational community, and I'm glad all this COVID nonsense is behind us and we can have that free travel back and forth, with proper identification. But we have, I believe, somewhere around, at this point, 1,000% increase in illegal crossings at the Canadian border. As a community in Western New York, having 4 bridge crossings, but a whole lot of water, between us where people can, land. I mean, it just creates a whole new series of challenges, and having that equipment for the sheriff's office and our state troopers and so many others that, have that duty to defend, I think is something that we join in, and we're also working, with the sheriff's office to try to find solutions for some of that important equipment, including a helicopter. So stay tuned. Mayor Ruda, welcome. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion today.
Thank you for having me here. I think we've heard a lot of astounding data and statistics, even our local data of the amount of calls and the number of lives lost. At the local level, it's not just data, it is our students, it's our young people, it's our young parents leaving children behind. And there's a very human element to it. To your point, Congressman, that 1 degree of separation, everybody has a story of someone that they know that lost their life tragically to this epidemic. I think to Sheriff Garcia's point of there's not enough attention, there's an outreach and education aspect that isn't being addressed enough, that it needs to be continuous messaging, and that it needs to not only go to our young people, but also to our adults who, again, it's not our grandparents' drug. It is a different type of drug these days that is so much more fatal and dangerous. I think the funding that at the federal level can be supplied to organizations like Focus. Focus received a federal grant, it got started, and they are one of our greatest tools in this community to help with that outreach, that education, those discussions about how to prevent, how to engage our young people to make better choices before they get to a point where they're losing their lives. I think that as a first responder, we are trained over and over again about the dangers of responding to an overdose call and knowing what we are putting ourselves in, what our police department is putting themselves in danger when they respond. But I think there's also the mental strain of going to the same house, the same person over and over again and administering Narcan, and to look at those ways that we can support our first responders. I think as a teacher in this community, every single one of us have a story of a former student who has lost their life, and it is a tragedy every single time we hear that. We do everything that we can to support and build a community that shows that support, and it's still not enough as we're hearing the data, our local data here. As the mayor of this community, that loss that we suffer is a hole in our community forever. It's something that can't be filled. And so I'm grateful for the HALT Fentanyl Act and what it hopefully can do for the law enforcement at the federal level. But I encourage everyone to think holistically and use every resource possible to continue the fight for this epidemic.
Thank you very much, Mayor. You brought us some excellent points. And to that, I'd like to turn things now over to Gwendolyn from Focus. Gwendolyn Bork, thank you so much for being here with us. Tell us a little bit about some of the programs that Focus puts forward.
Sure. Thank you, Congressman, for having me here, and thank you so much to see everybody here at this table, all rowing in the same direction, because fentanyl is most definitely the most dangerous drug. that is on our streets right now. I'm president of Focus for our community unity and support. We are the Lancaster Depew Youth Addiction Prevention Coalition. We were funded by the White House Office of Drug Control Policy in January of 2019. And this grant is run through the CDC. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of working with community stakeholders, working with the youth, working with parents, education, law enforcement, and collecting data on our youth, their substance use, the perception of risk, the protective factors that could help prevent a lot of these issues within our youth, and more or less creating a drug-free community. So this is a drug-free communities grant that we're under. And you know, I think that statistically in this community, we've done a really good job actually lowering the youth heroin overdoses. It's been, you can see it in our data. But what we're seeing right now is more uptick in marijuana use, and then the marijuana now potentially being laced with fentanyl. So this is near and dear to my heart. I've lost people. I lost my friend's daughter who was 6 months pregnant with her first grandbaby, you know, so it's sad. It's sad for me. I know I have a guest here, Al Robinson, but we know, I mean, some of the new stats, it's the Erie County Department of Health for 2023 said 96% of deaths now are fentanyl related. 96%. That's up from, like in 2022 was 88%, 2021 84%, 75% in 2020. You know, every 2 years, or every year, I'm sorry, I have to go to Washington, D.C. under, you know, just working with the feds on this particular grant and being effective in our community. And I have to work with our department heads, the DEA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, National Institute of Health. And before marijuana was legalized on a recreational here in New York, we were told by the DEA that the cartels were already here. And now here we have the legalization of recreational marijuana. And unfortunately, we've already have confirmed cases in New York State with fentanyl laced with marijuana, you know, just in Monroe County, you know. So you got the sergeant of the Erie, or the sheriffs over there in Sullivan County, I'm sorry, and he basically just said, you know, that they found it mixed in with marijuana in a Walmart parking lot. There's been numerous deaths to that. You know, in January 11th of just this year, downstate New York, a high school student overdosed after smoking a weed vape pen laced with fentanyl. The nurse actually was able to save his life with Narcan. You know, Narcan is definitely a savior. And the school administrator actually issued a warning about vape cartridges that could be laced with potential lethal fentanyl. You know, so in 2020, we did a key informant interview with a lot of our Lancaster youth, our Depew youth, social workers, you know, law enforcement, and we found that 86% of the youth in our local community think that there's a low perceived risk of marijuana use. So that's a major problem. If fentanyl is going to start being laced with our marijuana products, and I say products just in general, it could be the vape pens, it could be the dabs, the wax for the dabs, flowers, you know, edibles. There are many hands interchanging this particular product. They're bringing in their product. The supply is already here. The cartels have created their network years ago, and it's getting mixed now with these potential products that our kids think are safe. You know, and 26% of our students said that social norms such as decriminalization and medicalization has created favorable marijuana use. That they have actually indicated that parents have favorable attitudes toward marijuana use, and parents are smoking with their kids. You know, that's not uncommon. So we're slowing without the dispensaries having actual licenses and these actual farms being approved with their product, getting into these dispensaries in this county. The more that these sticker shops are just flowing product out of the back end to the parents, the friends, and the res, unfortunately, that's where all these students are getting their product from. We're going to see a huge skyrocket in marijuana, fentanyl-laced overdoses in this area, and that extremely concerns me. So I just appreciate your support, appreciate what everybody's doing. Mary Ruta, thank you so much for your partnership and anything we could do to help protect our kids, because I have teenagers myself, and it's scary to know that this is what we're up against right now.
Gwendolyn, thank you so much for all of that information and for what you're doing for our community. And you know, me and my office, we will continue to be supportive of your grants, you know, in the good work that you're doing. I mean, it's, I got to ask a question. What happened to the DARE program?
Well, you know, that's a really good question. We are going to go and have a conversation with the county legislature there about extending our school resource officers for a couple reasons. You know, first and foremost, to protect our children that are in school with teachers, learning in case there's an active shooter. But, you know, to Ms. Bork's point, drug dealers adapt because they're greedy. So, you know, they're going to go out to kids and try to get them, you know, hooked on fentanyl through what? Through marijuana. So it's never going to stop. Fentanyl is such a cheap drug compared to a kilo of heroin, cocaine, and so forth. So it's going to be mixed with everything. And I just wanted to make 2 points. One, Mayor, you hit it right on the head. 165 overdose deaths this year in Erie County. As we know here in Western New York, if you don't know someone, you know someone that knows that someone. And we've gone to too many wakes, and this transcends socioeconomic lines and town lines. Buffalo has 121 overdose deaths this year. But what we don't count is that these kids could have been from Lancaster. They could have been from Clarence or Grand Island, going in there and buying. And supervisor, you know, back...
Councilman right now.
Councilman, future supervisor, Bob Larry. You know, we continue working with our federal and state partners because it's such a big lift. But when crack came in, you're absolutely right. You know, we were able to deal with it because of the laws in place. The violence that came with it and the quality of life issues, today we're seeing the same, Congressman. But what we're seeing today is compared to the crack epidemic and all the shootings that happened, and we almost had 100 homicides in 1994 in Buffalo because of the LA Boys and the, you know, Sly Green and all the crack epidemic. But what we see now is that people go in and they're right back out. So the neighbors, you know, that have their cars stolen, their houses burglarized, everything, you know, that's lying around gets stolen because you can't make enough money to be able to sustain that addiction without stealing first from your family or neighbors and then from the neighborhoods. But to your question about there, we need to get back out.
No, was it state funded? Was it federally funded? Was it county funded? I mean, this when I was in school. I mean, you went through the program. You had an officer. I mean, where I went to school was Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office, who's actually Jim Quattrone was my DARE officer, the sheriff of Chautauqua County now. And it's memorable. It's still burned into my mind all these years later. And Kathy?
So in Lancaster, we have 3 school resource officers, and they still touch on DARE. They still go into the classrooms and talk to the students about the dangers of drugs. They don't do the full program, the DARE program that used to be the program, but they do make it a point to get into the classrooms and talk to the students about the dangers of drugs. Whatever happened to the DARE program, I don't know.
That's great.
If I may,
Gwendolyn.
The feds, I'm sure the federal government supplies a lot of this funding to OASIS, our state office, and then a lot of that funding for addiction prevention or drug education trickles down into our school districts on a county level, and then from there the schools actually have the ability to fund out like their school resource officers, but then there's addiction prevention programs. So every year Depew and Lancaster school districts, they bring in, whether it's kids escaping drugs, to talk about the dangers of, what's happening on the streets, the dangers of drug use. And then they also work with Erie County Prevention Council, who handles that within, I think it's Depew. Depew handles the Erie County Prevention Council. So there are prevention providers that are trained in addiction prevention to work within the school districts and be a support to the school resource officers. They're more or less an arm of one of our 12 sectors as a coalition.
That's great. And I am sure that it's very expensive to administer. But, having a branded program, a curriculum, with people at I believe it was elementary school, in your later stages of elementary school, it had to have been effective. And, unfortunately, somewhere that program fell on the cutting room floor. I can't help but think there wouldn't be a lot of community partners, not just from government, but maybe from our foundations and that would see the value in funding, a way to do this, because kids have to know it's going to kill you. I mean, there's an invincibility that we're dealing with our youth. I mean, you don't think anything can hurt you. And if someone's giving you the cold, hard facts and putting a little fear with the reality of what we're dealing with and the gravity of the situation, I can't help but think that would be a positive.
That's a great idea, Congressman. As you know, having to deal with the issues afterwards is much more expensive. So whatever money,
a lot of broken
put
lives and
into our
broken
kids,
homes.
Yes.
So, Mr. Al Robinson, thank you so much for being with us. You're from the Rebecca Rose Recovery Center of Western New York, and I just want to give you an opportunity to share some thoughts.
I am also a pastor in Lovejoy. Lovejoy was the epicenter back in 2016 of overdoses via fentanyl and heroin. We have been able to put together programming that can assist with this. However, the age bracket within my community has more than quadrupled in deaths. Black and indigenous Indians are now 4 to 6 times higher ratio than they were back in 2018. Just like the crack epidemic, it happened in the black community and it just went forward, like Sheriff Garcia said. But in this community, it's different. It didn't start in the black communities. And we are burying our people every week as a result of a cocaine and a fentanyl overdose. Every week I am getting calls, screaming mothers about overdosing, their children overdosing on gummy worms laced with an analog of fentanyl. If it's not U4470, then it's going to be analog, carafentanil, butylfentanyl, or some other molecule difference that allows them to continue trafficking this stuff on our streets. Furthermore, even while the body is still yet warm, the drug dealer is hot-shotting the person who told on them. Now let me explain to you what a hot shot is. A hot shot is where the person uses specifically the law that's in place that if you call and you report that a person is dying or have overdose, the Good Samaritan law, they use that law in their favor. And so they deliberately hot shot a person, call that this person is overdosed, and then they walk scot-free with not even so much as an investigation. And in the black community, it's extremely prolific. If you don't like someone, silence them. The drug dealers, like he said, they adapt, they get smart, and they use these laws for their favor. We are burying people now of that 120 that you mentioned, with still 51 left in the wings because the toxicology reports haven't come back. We are burying people now more than ever. Now I'm used to the trauma. You remember that storm that we just had in that blizzard? Our church saved 154 people's lives in that storm. So we're used to, we saw people dead on the streets, frozen. We're used to it, but when you hear the screams of a mother over her child who has just eaten a gummy worm and is now dead from an overdose, where 4 shots of Narcan could not revive them. That's how potent this stuff is. Narcan is just ineffective. It's outside of the ability to save their lives. It's a problem. This is something that's crippling our community. We went from less than 10% of overdoses to 28% of overdoses while still only being 13% of the community of Erie County. That's a magnificent increase. So they're adapting and they're finding new customers.
That's a good point, Mr. Robinson. We've seen it affecting the minority community, where it was mostly affecting the white suburban kids back with the opiates, but it's no drugs are safe.
There's nothing.
cocaine, gummy worms, marijuana, adapting to greed, Congressman. That's what the drug dealers are doing.
Well, and that's, what we want to accomplish with this HALT Act and why we need it to be signed into law is to make the scheduling of this drug permanent, so that it's not, if it expired, some of these substances become street legal. As you pointed out, the New York State penal law hasn't caught up with the times and how fast that this crisis has moved. Law enforcement would lose their authority to seize these extremely lethal drugs. Drug traffickers, they would be empowered to, push deadlier and deadlier drugs on our streets. They could skirt the federal law if this isn't made permanent and this, for some reason, expired. And it also would stop our Border Patrol agents from their ability to seize these things as they come in. As you talked about adaptability, business always finds a way to adapt. This is big business now, but they're doing it at the expense of our communities, and they're stealing the lives of young ones and breaking families and breaking people's lives in the process. I want to just kind of close here as we go around, from a public policy perspective, whether it be state, federal, local, all cards on the table here. What can we do to help this going forward? Al, from your perspective, what can we do to curb this, to get this to slow down and hopefully stop?
This is going to sound rather extreme, but it's effective. Right now, I can watch right on the street corner of Box and Kerr in the city of Buffalo move a 3.5 or an 8 ball laced with fentanyl and then get caught, back out on the street just 2 hours later. Back to that family member, resupplying them for their evening. Because it's always morning, noon, and lunch. It's dinner, excuse me. It's always that schedule, and we can count on someone overdosing in our Lovejoy district because these people are let back out on the streets. Like I read the HALT Act, and it will cover every possible analog of fentanyl. That is a magnificent leap forward because they can't change a molecule. They can't change a covalent bond. They're unable to adapt because it's covering it all. And I am all for that.
Great, thank you very much. It's a lot of the discussion I've heard around the district involves, having, stronger tools at the disposal of our local law enforcement to get these people off the street, and throw in the book at the people that are selling these products to our kids. But the adaptability, where now with the proliferation of legal marijuana, if it's laced, you won't know until it's too late. And that's the thing. Gwendolyn, what are your thoughts? What can we do? What can we all work together on to throw the brakes on this crisis?
So I agree with what Al Robinson said. I agree with what the sheriff said as far as, anything we could do to help law enforcement. Obviously, what you're doing with the HALT Act would be epic. That is exactly what we need to do, is give teeth to law enforcement, give them the ability to actually do their jobs, right? And prosecute, because as long as there's no repercussions, there's really no reasons, they'll keep cutting it, they'll keep mixing it, and it's cheaper. It's more, that's business for these guys, right? There's going to be a lot that, anything we could do to help support organizations like us. We do have them all over our county. There's one for the Alden area, there's one for the Iroquois School District area. We work a lot with the law enforcement and the youth and education to help create education programs. And it's through our funding, through this White House Office of Drug Control Policy grant. So, we're going to be working on billboards to actually put that message out that your marijuana isn't safe, unless it's from a dispensary, until those dispensaries get those licenses. So, continue to support your local, drug-free community grant coalitions. Get the word out. Education. We need to educate these youth and the parents and the community on the dangers of these fentanyl-related incidents, and just give our law enforcement the tools that they need.
Keith, would you like to offer anything on behalf of Senator Galvin?
Thanks for having us here today. I apologize the senator couldn't make it. As you noted, former state trooper, former Erie County sheriff. He's also the ranking member on the Senate Standing Health Committee. So because of those two areas of policy, he's a member of the New York State Senate Task Force on opioids and addiction. We've had a series of roundtables over the past couple of years as well. More or less, the feedback has been the same, and the conversation about the analogs and the continuing the changing of the chemistry, the bad guys staying one step ahead of the good guys has been really the ongoing challenge. And it sounds like this federal law would take a big piece out of that, or a huge leap forward. Senator Holy supports that and appreciates everything that you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Everyone else today.
Certainly give the senator our best. He's been a great partner in government. Chief, captains, from the Lancaster, police department's, perspective, what can we do as officials to help you out?
I think continuing these kind of discussions, bringing in other partners that are also dealing with it on a different level, that can partner with law enforcement to make our jobs easier, but also from state and federal level, seeing common sense laws put on the books that give us the tools to properly enforce these laws, and having the repercussions from the judicial level to add some penalties for people committing these crimes. All those put together, I think, are a good recipe to start.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here with us today. Mayor, any closing comments? Any thoughts?
I think that, like the chief said, continuing these conversations, getting our stakeholders, getting our levels of government together to brainstorm and to keep talking about this topic. I feel like sometimes it feels taboo, right? It's something that we don't want to really discuss or talk about, that we want to empower families who have lost lives within their family to share their stories. And the more that people are willing to share their stories, again, the more human it feels, the more real it feels for young people. So thank you for the opportunity to bring everyone together, and hopefully this will continue into the future. Thank you.
Mayor. Really appreciate your participation here today. Assemblyman?
Congressman, thank you very much. Again, thank you to law enforcement, to our local officials here, to our great partner, Senator Pat Gallivan, who I work very closely with on these issues. And the importance of is to continue the discussion, to talk with the law enforcement, to enact state laws that will hold those individuals accountable who are killing our children and people in our community. It is so very important. I will continue to push for that legislation, work in cooperation with you, Congressman, on this very important bill, and do my part to bring more education and more teeth to the laws in the city.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Legislator Tadaro.
Congressman, this is a great conversation. I mean, there's so many things I've learned today from different levels of government, or actually in the trenches, or learning how the schools are not really learning about it as I thought they were. It kind of is eye-opening, but Gwendolyn, you're doing some great work, and thank you for what you do. Pastor Robinson, also pleasure meeting you today. It's great to find, someone from the city coming here to the suburbs and explaining your viewpoint, because as you can see in the data, your numbers are thriving, but this is imperative that we're all here talking about it. So I want to thank the law enforcement also for being here. So whatever tool that I can offer from the county government level, I'll make sure that I advocate for it.
Thank you, legislator. Really appreciate it. Councilman, soon-to-be supervisor-elect Bob Leary.
Congressman, thank you very much for putting this on. It's a great roundtable. I look at this from two different perspectives. From the law enforcement perspective, it's got to be cooperation with the local, county, state, and federal government. It's just got to happen. For you guys to push for tougher laws to be in place is an outstanding idea. Putting some money into this that will hopefully come down to our local departments will be helpful, or to the county. And again, from a law enforcement point of view, I look at all these people as victims. I mean, anybody who's out there on the streets using drugs, they're being preyed upon by the drug dealers themselves. We got to take that. We got to separate it. We got to stop the drug dealers, treat the other people as victims, try to get them the help that they need. But for the dealers, you got to be tough on them. There's no other way around it. So in our town, we try to give the police department everything they need. If you guys got any type of grants or anything, we're trying to push for a couple more officers right now. Hopefully we can get that. Be tougher out there on the streets. If you guys need anything, let us know. So we'll look at it from law enforcement perspective one way, But again, we got to work, like the mayor said, holistically and to go out to the community. I think the town needs to do a better job of that. The village is doing a great job right now, and we'll try to do that and work more with the community at this point.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Undersheriff?
Thanks for hosting this event, Congressman. It's a worthy discussion, and I'm glad we're all here today together to talk about it. From a law enforcement perspective, and Councilman, you touched on this earlier, they've moved the goalposts on law enforcement, and when we lack leverage, we lack cooperation, and when you lack cooperation, you're not going to have robust prosecutions in this arena. So we need to have some common sense in our laws. Close with that.
Thank you. And our great sheriff, John Garcia.
Congressman, it's so refreshing to have this conversation, really. I mean, we talk about it, at the office all the time, and it just breaks my heart because it's all people that are neighbors and, our kids. And it doesn't matter if you live in the city of Buffalo or in the city of Lackawanna or in the town of Grand Island. It doesn't matter. It affects everyone. So we're not going to arrest ourselves, out of this. We have to, federally tighten our borders. The cartels are here. We've seized kilos of fentanyl with, cartel markings. We had a couple press conferences last year showing that. They are here. Now, also on top of that, we need the state legislation, and like Pastor Robinson said, it has to cover all the analogs, because otherwise they will change it and it will be then legal. Something that you said, Congressman, was made for good, right, for pain relief and for cancer victims and so forth, are now, it's being sold for profit. We will continue to go after the drug dealers that are peddling poison in our neighborhood, no matter what this disastrous bail law has done. It was there to help indigent people. It's killing people in the city of Buffalo 300% more than anyone else. It's affecting the city of Buffalo, Lovejoy, Black Rock, Riverside, everywhere. So listen, this bail reform that's supposed to help indigent people is causing more deaths because the drug dealers that everyone could see openly dealing drugs, neighbors that are good Samaritans, that are saying, that gentleman there, and I'll call him a gentleman, that gentleman there that's dealing drugs, they call the police. They have to be thinking that we're not doing anything because he gets back out there quicker than, the arresting officers. What are we doing? Like the undersheriff said, why are we moving the goalposts for the good guys? Everything that's been done has been to benefit the criminal lately, be it with bail reform, raise the age, less is more. Really? Less is more? Less is what? More crime? It's just, we need help. We will continue working, Congressman, to protect and serve the people of Erie County, but we need help. We need help.
Well, I really thank you greatly for this. I thank our partners in the media that have been here to help us bring attention to this conversation, because I'm having these across our congressional district. I find them extremely helpful. Hearing that firsthand information as people that are dealing with this crisis, helps us craft better public policy, in having discussions not for just politicians to come and shoot their mouth off, but to listen. That's what's more important than anything, is to listen to people that are dealing with this crisis. I mean, there's no playbook on this. I mean, marijuana, whether you love the idea, you hate the idea of it being, it's here. We're going to, have to kind of deal with that as a society. Things are moving very fast with that. But this is now the #1 cause of death among adults 18 to 49. 109,000 Americans died of drug overdoses last year. Think of that. That's the largest football stadium in America. That's more than will fit in there. They're dead. Roughly 75,000 of those died of synthetic opioid abuse. Largely fentanyl or fentanyl-related substances. I mean, this is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, or worse, just a few milligrams that would fit in the ear of Lincoln on a penny. just that little amount ends a life. We have to continue to draw and shine a bright light on this crisis and not normalize this drug use. I mean, we have to have a real war on drugs, but it's got to be from the community against the drugs and the drug dealers. And I unfortunately don't get a vote on New York State policies as a member of Congress, but I will use the platform of this office any chance I get to talk about how wrong-headed New York State's criminal justice system is, because it's put our law enforcement officers in handcuffs while the criminals walk free to devastate our communities. And whether it's, these murderers selling this poison to our kids and our youth, or it's petty crime, it's devolving our great communities. And no matter how hard our mayor, our county legislators, our assemblymen, our supervisors work to make the community better, this erodes the great work that they're doing. People not feeling safe in our streets or at our shopping malls, or I heard a story yesterday, someone going to work, a county clerk's employee going to the DMV, got mugged for her cell phone in the Eastern Hills Mall, Clarence, New York. I mean, petty crime is up everywhere, and these drugs are a big part of it. Our broken criminal justice system is part of it. And that's just a cold, hard reality, and we have to work together. So I thank all of our great partners in government that are here today, our law enforcement officials and those, Al and Gwendolyn, just for bringing your perspective on the treatment side, on the victim side. I mean, your contributions to this discussion were really invaluable. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it, and we're going to keep this dialogue going.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you so much.
Good, sir.